If you look at your schedule, you'll see that our next presenter is Ms. Becky Rogers, who is a Senior Project Manager for Neil Schaefer. Becky has worked as a transportation engineer and planner in the state of Alabama for the past 20 years and currently serves as a Senior Project Manager for Neil Schaefer Incorporated in the Birmingham office. She attended Auburn University, where she earned a Bachelor of Civil Engineering degree and a Master of Community Planning degree, both with a focus on transportation. Becky holds professional engineering license in 5 states and is certified as a professional transportation planner and a road safety professional. Her experience includes transportation planning, roadway design, transit planning, aviation planning and design, traffic and safety analysis, and large-scale data collection and mapping projects. Please welcome Becky Rogers. Becky.
Good morning. Last time I spoke to you in November, we had 3 projects that we were just beginning for ALDOT. So basically, I think I just told you what we were going to do. Well, a lot of time has passed since then, and actually I had to redo this presentation because I was ready to give it to you in May, and we've made even more progress since then. So now I'm going to report to you where we are today on all these projects. Like I said, there were 3 of them, and as of today, 2 of them are about 95% finished. And the third one, I don't know, we're maybe at about 60, something like that. But anyway, so I'm just going to talk through these projects with you real quick and let you know what pertains to you specifically, and we'll just go from there. So as was mentioned, my name is Becky Rogers. I'm with Neil Schaefer. I've been working with the ALDOT Transit folks for a number of years now. I've kind of lost count, actually, but I do appreciate the opportunity. Great folks, and we enjoy working with them. So we'll just kick right in from there. So the first project I want to talk to you about is the policies that we've been putting together. And so basically, just to recap, I think I had this slide last time, but just to recap our scope of work, what we were tasked with doing was to review what policies were required by FTA, what policies ALDOT already had in place, and then to evaluate how they compared to each other, like what was needed versus what ALDOT already had or what ALDOT didn't have and was needed, and then based on what was missing to fill in those gaps. You know, the ones we could update, where new policies were needed to add them, and then in some cases to develop templates for certain policies. And sorry, I keep hitting that button. And so I'll talk about specifics in a minute. But basically what we did is we looked at, in addition to looking at FTA, I know a lot of you have policies that you've already got, and we were given copies of some of those things, others we were able to find online. So we looked at a lot of like guidebooks and policies and operations manuals and things that some of you already had in place, and then we looked at a lot of other states and cities and counties around the U.S. and kind of pulled the best of everything to put together a policy book. So basically, you know, why do we need policies? Well, I like this cartoon at the bottom. This is Pinterest, obviously. Have you ever done one of these where you see something and you're like, oh, I could create that? And then you have their expectation of what it's going to look like based on the picture on the computer, and then when you actually do it, it looks a little different. I've had that happen a lot of times. So basically, you know, we want to have clear expectations, and we want to establish boundaries, guidelines, and best practices for acceptable behavior. Basically, if you don't tell people what is expected, they're going to do what they think they should be doing, and sometimes that doesn't match what you think they should be doing. And so basically, it just kind of gives everybody clear expectations of what, you know, how you want certain things to function. Also, it identifies the employee rights and responsibilities. I already mentioned consistency, and then it reduces your risk. If you've got a policy in place for something, then, you know, if something doesn't go according to plan, you know, you've got something you can point back to, you know, especially, you know, if it ever were to get to the point of like a lawsuit or something, you know, you've got something in writing you can go back to. So what we did is we created 10 different policy groups. And so just to give you an idea of what some of these things are, First group was agency information. We have 12 policies under this group, and this includes your agency mission statement, setting goals, objectives, and performance measures for your agency, setting up a transportation steering committee, providing access to information, who does and does not have access to certain information. What are your service area and your service hours? This covers things like your ADA policy, or making sure that you have a statement saying that you'll comply with the federal ADA policy. Your Title VI program. Your DBE statement, disadvantaged business enterprise, your equal employment opportunity policy statement. This next one, we actually added to the list for obvious reasons. It wasn't on our original list, but your emergency preparedness plan. You know, nobody was expecting COVID and all the changes that had to be implemented due to that, so it's important to have a plan for the future. Obviously, it's hard to plan for something you don't know is going to happen, but now that we know, we can plan in case we ever have another pandemic. And then how are you going to communicate policy changes? So that's all included in the agency information policies. Then our biggest group is the personnel policies and procedures. So some of the things included in this are job descriptions, standardized questionnaire for applicants, so that when you're interviewing people for positions, it's kind of equal, the same questions that you're asking people. Your code of ethics, confidentiality statement, what licenses and certifications are required for different positions, your dress code and appearance that's expected of your employees, driver record checks, criminal background checks, how should employees conduct themselves on vehicles, what happens when your vehicle is out of service, the driver's log and manifest, what should that look like, what information should be on that, personal use of agency vehicles, is any of that allowed, is it not? Let's see, I guess I won't read all these, I'll skip down a little bit. Cell phone usage, drug and alcohol policy, performance reviews, a complaint procedure for employees if they want to issue a complaint, you know, what do they need to do that? And then also, kind of on the positive side, you know, how can employees offer suggestions to improve things? And then employee recognition and awards. So those are the kind of policies we have in that group. Our training group is the smallest group, but it includes, in addition to employee training requirements, it includes a driver's manual, and this is one of the things that we have built a template for. So, you know, and this isn't meant to replace if you've already got one. You know, we're not trying to replace what you already have, but, you know, the next time you go to revise it, if you don't have one, this will give you a good starting point, you know, to put one together. You can customize it for your use. And if next time you go to update yours, it might give you some ideas of things you might want to include that you didn't think about the first time around. So, like I said, this training one, even though it was the smallest, actually took us the most amount of time because we were building that driver's manual template. Safety, obviously safety is probably our number one priority in transit. So this includes a policy for having a safety plan. I believe there's talk about that tomorrow maybe. Accident incident policy, a seatbelt policy, wheelchair and mobility device securement, how do you secure portable oxygen breathing tanks? Let's see, vehicle evacuation, how to handle, how to work a fire extinguisher, how to, you know, use your safety reflectors properly, how to deal with disruptive or abusive passengers, injury on the job, what do you do in that situation? How to deal with bloodborne pathogens, what should be included in a first aid kit or hazardous material kit, and inclement weather conditions. So those are some of the things we've included in that group. Then our customer service group, we have 20 policies in this group, and again, I'll just read a handful of these, but this deals with scheduling, trips cancellation, pickup window, wait time policies, no-show policy, trip denials, how do you handle flag stops, let's see, what activities are prohibited by passengers, what restricted items on vehicles, how do you handle passenger parcels, are they allowed to bring them, if so, how big, how many, child safety seats, your policy for service animals or transporting children and pets, personal care attendants, and then like what procedures or what assistance are the drivers allowed to offer to the passengers, lift procedures, and then we also have a section for passenger complaints. and comments. All right. Oh, and then the other thing we created with that group is a template for a rider's guide or a passenger handbook. So I don't know if any of you have that currently in place, but that's a recommended practice from FTA. So went ahead and put that in there. Okay, dispatch and radio. We have a few policies on this one. This has to do with your dispatch procedures, radio communications, radio etiquette, things like that is included in that one. And then the financial policies, this has to do with fare structure, ticketing, fare collection, a tips and gifts policy, petty cash, let's see, I guess fuel cards, procurement, and then conflicts of interest, capital replacement, stuff like that. So that's what's included in that one. And then maintenance, this has to do with your daily pre-trip inspections. We've got a template in there for a form for that. Preventative maintenance, your oil changes and your tire rotations, things like that. Corrective maintenance, which deals more with repairs. How to handle a road call or a vehicle breakdown. Lift maintenance, onboard security system maintenance, and then your policies for fueling and getting your vehicles cleaned is what's included in that one. The record-keeping policies, these will be more on the office end, but these are things like inventories, disposition, how you're going to dispose of things when they're no longer needed, and then tracking statistics and historical trends, things like that. Some of that is needed for the annual reporting for the TAM plan, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And then some of that will just help you plan better in the future to keep up with certain tracking statistics. This also deals with policy for keeping personnel files, drug and alcohol records, computer backup. And then the final group of policies is the outreach policies. And this includes things like your public participation process, participation in community events, what you want to do for that, transportation coordination with other agencies, written in-kind plans, brochures, and then passenger surveys and non-rider surveys. And those, are used to get future folks to ride your system. So anyway, that's a lot of policies. And the good thing is, this is a fluid document, so, if we've forgotten anything, things can be added. But like I said, we looked at a lot of sources to determine what should go into this. All policies are standalone, so, if you don't need all of them, let's say you've already got policies for some of these things, you just pick the ones you need. It's very easy to pull the ones you need. They each have up to 5 sections. All of them have a purpose. Why is the policy needed? Definitions, if there's anything in the policy that's not totally clear, we put a definition section in them. Some of them didn't require definitions. And then a procedure. What do you need to do to create that policy? What should be included in that policy? Responsibilities, who's responsible for enforcing the policy? And then there's either an example or a template if it's applicable. Like I said, some of them are pretty self-explanatory and don't require that, but others, like I mentioned, like the driver's manual, things like that, we've put a template, or like for the mission statement, we've put an example of what one of those might look like. And so where we are right now is we have submitted drafts of all policies except for the training, which is sitting on my desk for final review, so those should be coming next week to ALDOT. But everything else has been submitted. Most of them have been reviewed, and we've received comments back, and we are making those very few changes that have been asked to make. And then at that point, we will combine all of these into a manual and turn the whole thing over to ALDOT, and then my understanding is that it will be made available to you all through the website, and you'll be able to go in and pick what you need to put together your policies, which I guess leads right into the next slide. So what do you do with this information? First of all, once the policy manual is made available to you, please review it. So there's a lot of really good information in there. And then customize the policies to fit your agencies. You will see that, we don't know, everybody's operations hours are not the same. So we just put X's in for the hours, but you need to go in and update it to fit your situation. Same thing with, your service area, things like that. There's no one size fits all for some of that. And then what you do, once you have your policy manual put together, you provide a copy to all your employees and train them according to, not every policy will apply to every employee. So it's probably not necessary to train your drivers how to do dispatch procedures. But what you'll do is, pull the policies that pertain to each job classification and make sure that those employees have a copy of what they need and that they are trained on what they should be doing. And then review your policies. We suggest annually. And if there's any updates that need to be made, keep that document updated, and then communicate the policy changes to the employees. And then finally, I just wanted to hit again on this driver's handbook template, just to tell you what we put in there. You'll see a couple of your agencies are up there because we did borrow some information from a few of y'all, which we really appreciate. But our table of contents for the driver's handbook, we've got an agency information section. And again, this is geared towards the drivers specifically. Agency information, driver job description, and policies that pertain to drivers. Daily operations, what do drivers need to know about passenger fares and fare collection, what policies pertain to passengers, safety procedures, maintenance procedures, and finally there's some appendices that have some template forms and things like that. So, like I said, I talked a while about that one, but that's probably the one that had the most information that I wanted you to know specifically. So our next project, and I'll just wait till the end, and then if anyone has questions on any of these, I can take them at the end. So our next project that we've been working a lot on is the vehicle specs and procurement. So what we were tasked to do in this project is to review all of the existing specifications and floor plans for all the vehicles, and to also identify standard and optional items for these vehicles. And basically we were looking at, things change over time. What's available from the manufacturers today differs from what's been available in the past. So, we were looking at new options, looking at, new chassis, things like that. And basically getting the specs up to date with what's currently available. And also what you need, which leads to the next thing we were tasked with doing was to survey 5307 and 5311 providers to determine some of your needs. So we did send out a survey, and thank you to all of you that responded. That was very helpful, and we used that information in building the new specs. We also looked at how Alabama does their purchasing, and we, in the course of doing that, there's some changes that are going to need to be made there, and I won't go into all of that right now, but that's another project that will be worked on in the future to get some of the bugs in that system worked out. But in the meantime, a lot of that was identified, which was helpful. And then we also looked at state and federal requirements and, what the feds required that didn't necessarily match what the state required, and, what changes need to be made to make the procurement process a lot smoother in the future. And then finally, we've been updating the specs. And basically preparing independent specifications for autonomous bidding. So where are we right now? As of right now, of course, we've reviewed all the current ALDOT specifications and floor plans. I didn't put this on the list, but we've also reached out to some of the manufacturers. Several different manufacturers have been very helpful. I think some of them might be here. But they've been very helpful to answer some of our questions about different vehicle options and things like that. We researched similar vehicle specifications in other states, again, pulling the best of from a lot of different places. We reviewed the ALDOT procurement procedures and federal purchasing requirements. We did the survey, which I mentioned a minute ago, compiled the results of that. We prepared a brand new specification for a high roof van that did not currently exist. So that is complete. And then we've updated the ALDOT specifications for the modified van, the minivan, and the 17-passenger bus. And then, as I mentioned, we looked into ALDOT's purchasing requirements. And then we actually had to go back from the original specs we created and reformat them. We learned that the formatting required by the software that Procurement Office used didn't match the format we had done, so we spent a little time doing that. But completed, as I mentioned, we've completed a spec for high roof van, and this includes floor plans as well as the specification text. Modified van and minivan, specifications in progress. The 17-passenger van, we have submitted that, and we're kind of going back and forth with ALDOT. Tommy's reviewing it now, I believe, and We should have that one done shortly. And then we still have remaining the 21 passenger bus, 25 passenger, and 28 to 30 passenger. So like I said, we're working our way through these specs and hope to have them all ready soon. I guess that's all I've got on that one. All right, and then our third project was the TAM plan update. We did the initial TAM plan, and I believe it was 2018 was when it was finalized. And so to put that TAM plan together, we had to use 2017 data to finish it up in 2018, and that was the very first, and for those of you who don't know, that's Transit Asset Management is what TAM stands for. And so we did that first update, or first initial plan. But the thing is, it had never been done before. So there was some data that was needed to put the plan together that wasn't being collected because it wasn't needed prior. So there was, really no reason prior to collect this data. So we had to just put it together with the data that was available. And I know a lot of you submitted data for that. ALDOT submitted a lot of data for that. So we just went with what was available. Well, since that time, now we know what is needed. And so I know ALDOT has been collecting additional data and has had you all submit additional data. And just one example I would say is the time between road calls for each vehicle. That was something that a lot of people weren't collecting before, but that's something that's going to be needed in the future to do these TAM plan updates. So ALDOT wanted us to update the TAM plan using the 2019 data because it was a lot more thorough. So basically our task was to collect the 2019 inventory and condition data from ALDOT and update the current physical condition of the rolling stock, again through 2019, look at the performance measures that we set, back when we did the initial TAM plan, and see how, things measured up against the performance measures and then adjust them as needed. Because to be honest, the very first set of performance measures and targets were kind of a shot in the dark. It wasn't a total guess. We looked at, ALDOT's past of purchasing vehicles and dispositions, and, based on age and useful life of vehicles, we made our best educated guess on what we thought they could do in the future. But then once you start looking at the actual data, we needed to make adjustments. And then finally, just to update the TAM plan. So here's where we are on this one. We have updated the lists of transit providers and accountable executives. We've collected the data and gone through it collected the data and updated the inventory information for the revenue vehicles, service vehicles, and facilities, and then did the same thing for the condition analysis. So all that's been updated, again, using 2019 data. And then we calculated how the performance compared to the initial performance measures and performance targets that were adopted during the first plan. And then we updated those to the new, to what made more sense. We had to pull them in a little bit. I think the initial targets were a little too aggressive based on funding available and what was actually happening in the data. So we pulled those back in, because what we don't want is, for y'all to miss your goals every year because, they're too lofty. The goal is to try to make them higher each year, but, we need to start with what is achievable, based on the resources available. Then we developed asset replacement recommendations and assessed the likely impacts of these replacements based on available funding from federal and local matches. We developed a revised implementation plan and some action items to go with that. And then we did an update of the TAM plan, which we submitted, I think it was early June that we submitted that to ALDOT. So real quick, I wanted to pull up here. These are the new performance measures and targets for the reporting year 2020. So this is what's going to show up in the new TAM plan. And so basically, it reduced the percentages of how many of each vehicle would be acquired each year. It just brought the percentages down just a little bit to make them more realistic. So where we are right now, ALDOT has sent us some comments on the plan, and we are working our way through those comments right now. They should be finished this month easily. And then once we have those submitted, we will submit the final TAM plan to ALDOT. At that point, hopefully they will adopt it, and then they will distribute it to all of you. And if you remember from the initial TAM plan, you had an accountable executive who basically signed off saying that you agreed to the provisions of ALDOT's TAM plan. Instead of making your own, you wanted to be a part of the group TAM plan. And so we'll have to update those participation statements that you agree with this new one. And that is really all I've got, but those are our projects, and this is my contact information, and if anyone has any questions, I will try to answer them.